Hello there, you're watching Bizworld. The government is reviewing the implementation of several taxes, including the excise duty on pre-mixed beverages and the low-value goods LVG tax. Secretary-General of Treasury, Datuk Johan Mahmud Merakan, said this is to ensure economic growth does not affect sectors that are in the process of recovery, including tourism and retail.
Terdapat satu dua cukai yang ikut jadual telah diumumkan untuk dilaksanakan pada awal tahun ini seperti low value goods tax dengan premix sugar tax, tapi kerajaan telah mengambil keputusan untuk menangguhkan pelaksanaan cukai-cukai tersebut, mengambil kira untuk memastikanlah bahawa ia tidak menjejaskan rakyat, terutamanya dalam konteks cabaran kos sara hidup lah.
He was met at KPMG's Tax and Business Summit 2022. The ministry is also examining the implementation of the luxury goods tax, which involves non-controversial goods such as gold and mechanisms for foreign tourists to reclaim their tax payment. The luxury goods tax, which is expected to be introduced in the second half of this year, will also be developed independently. Malaysia's retail trade growth forecast will be able to touch 8.9% this year, driven by the pent-up demand and improving labour market. MIDF research noted that it will also be supported by stable inflationary pressure, accommodative economic policies and an uptick in the tourism industry. The normalising overnight policy rate, which is closer to the normalised rate of 3%, would have minimal effect on the domestic spending outlook. Additionally, airport passenger movements is also expected to improve this year, underpinned by borders reopening by China and Japan. However, the recovery towards the 2019 level is still a long journey, despite the international borders reopening by Malaysia. The exposure of Malaysia's banking institutions to the collapse of United States-based Silicon Valley Bank, or SVB, is minimal and limited. Deputy Finance Minister Stephen Sim said the country's banking system remains competitive and resilient as an effective financial intermediary.
Peraturan permodalan dan juga dari segi peraturan mudah tunai, kita mempunyai peraturan yang agak ketat. Dan ujian tekanan secara berkala turut dilaksanakan ke atas sistem perbankan Malaysia untuk memastikan bahawa sistem kita mempunyai kesiapsiagaan berdepan dengan segala tekanan di pasaran.
He said this during the minister's question time at the Dewan Rakyat this morning. Recently, SVB collapsed on Friday in the biggest US bank failure since the 2008 financial crisis. Markets and financial authorities worldwide are on edge, with US deposit holders seeking the safety of larger banks amid growing worries about the health of smaller institutions and the prospect of more failures in the sector. Integrated circuit design service provider Opstar debuted on the ACE market of Bursa Malaysia with a 225.4% premium. According to its CEO Ng Meng Thai, at the opening bell, its share price opened at RM2.05 over the issue price of 63 cents, with some 19 million of its shares traded.
5G, AI, IoT, EV, right? All this new technology continue to drive the needs for this semiconductor product. So in the longer term, we still see the growth in this industry. And semiconductor industry is an industry that everybody heavily outsource, whether you're in the manufacturing or whether you're in the design, right? So company like Opstar, we continue to benefit.
Opstar has raised RM104.25 million from the initial public offering exercise via the issuance of some 165 million new ordinary shares. The company plans to utilize RM50 million of the proceeds to expand its workforce and RM25 million for the establishment of new offices. Meanwhile, RM12 million is allocated for its R&D expenditure and RM12.65 million for working capital. That's all the time we have for Bizworld. I'm Nadia Azmi. Thank you for watching and keep tuning in to TV3.